welcome to the brand new Learning Reinvented podcast, brought to you by myself, James Poletyllo, and The Learning Effect. There's lots of learning podcasts out there, so we wanted to do something slightly different. Rather than speak to one of the industry experts or bring in someone who's got decades and decades of experience, we wanted to speak to someone who is new to the learning profession. Absolutely delighted to be joined by Giulia Salvi. Welcome to the podcast, Giulia.
Hi, James. Thank you very much for having me in this podcast. It's absolutely an excitement for me being here today. Thank you.
So should we start off by finding a little bit about you? Do you want to tell the listeners who you are and a bit about your background?
So basically, as you can tell from my accent, I'm not from the UK. I'm Italian. I moved to the UK over 5 years ago, after qualifying as a lawyer and working in a law firm. And I just realized that I wanted to have a different challenge. So I moved to London and I started working in retail, as a lot of foreigners do, just to improve my English and just trying on something different. And then I realized that I really loved working in there, and then I immediately progressed as into a management role where I worked with a lot of teams, and I realized how much I loved working with people and seeing them progress and develop and actually achieving their professional and personal goals. In my 5 years of working experience, I had this passion for people and the development growing more and more and more, until I realized that I have to do something about it. And I wanted to get a professional qualification. That's why I started in January to work towards the CIPD diploma in learning and development. And thankfully, that was a very good decision, especially for the situation that we have at the moment, because I was studying for this qualification while I was looking for a job. So it actually kept me sane. It was actually really, really good having this chance of focusing on my personal development. So yeah, that is a bit of my past experience and a bit of what I'm doing now. So looking for work and working towards my professional qualification.
So when we've talked before, Giulia, we've worked out that we've actually got some very similarities in our background. So we both studied law, we both went into retail, and then we both sort of progressed, or progressing into learning and development. So what led you from law to retail to learning and development? Because I've been asked that a lot in my career, and I'm really genuinely interested to understand why you're making that transition.
Well, yeah, we spoke about it last time, and actually it was very, very interesting realizing that we actually had the same experience and the same kind of path and kind of progress we had in our profession. Well, obviously, studying law taught me a lot of things, especially having like this mindset of problem solving and trying to understand different point of views and position, and try to actually visualize the entire situation and not just one side or the other. And obviously that helped me a lot in the next work experience that I had in retail. Obviously, I chose retail at the beginning because moving to a new country wasn't that easy, especially with law, trying to find immediately a job in a law firm. And my English wasn't the greatest at the beginning, so I had to find a way to learn as much as I could and trying to find a new challenge. And that is why I decided to start a career in retail. I think that both in law and both in learning and development, you keep focusing on solving problems and focusing on people and actually find the best way and the best way for everyone. So that is why probably I have this tendency towards people, and obviously even learning, because even in law, you need to continuously learn and learn and learn, and not just laws and everything. It's just it's continuously developing yourself and try to understand how the world is moving towards something else and towards the future. So probably that's why.
And what about your role in retail? What did you learn there?
In retail was completely different, because in all honesty, I never worked in retail before, so it was a completely different thing. I realized so many different roles in retail, because obviously as a customer you always think that in retail there's always and just the front of house, but there's so many other things happening behind the curtains, and they actually made me understand how much work there is behind everything that you see on the shop floor. And another thing that I actually realized as well is that the people that are working in retail are usually, for the most part, are students, especially in England, are students and young people that trying to find a job just to continue studying for their degrees or graduate or other things, and might be that sometimes they're not even realizing that that could be their future career. So I always focused on them and tried to get the best from their experience in retail. And probably that's why it was a big challenge, especially for the situation that retail has about the high turnover, and just having like this idea that people just go there just to find a job and not maybe the job, because it might be that out of those people, maybe a 5% will actually continue to develop and continue a career in retail.
So you're in a retail job and you then decide to get into learning and development. So what was the trigger? What really led you to make that decision?
Well, the trigger and then the consequence about that was that I always realized that obviously the requirement for a manager is always focusing on the KPIs and obviously making sale at the end of the day, making the customer happy, so customer service and everything. But at the end of the day, everything happens if the people that work in there are actually happy to be there, having a focus on what they're doing and having a reason why they're there. So every single day, my mindset was always about the people and how to take the best of every situation and every day. So I always focused on them, trying to make them understand that even if it's not the future jobs or the future, they have to get some skills and they need to understand that everything and every situation and every experience can teach them something. So that's why I try to focus on that. And I'm saying that was a consequence because then over a year ago, I've been appointed as a logistics and operation trainer for new store openings. So I actually had the chance to be a professional trainer in a way. Obviously, it was a part-time one, but at the same time was actually very, very nice having like this challenge to meet new people, meet new members of staff, and try to make them understand what really happens behind the curtains, and try to make them understand what is the best practice and all these kind of things. So just trying to give them a good onboarding about operations. It was really, really nice.
So you're into that first role and you decide to study as well?
I just realized that I wanted to have an academic knowledge of learning and development, and try to understand as much as I could about the techniques, about the theories, and even having just a qualification. It just is obviously really, really good having a qualification as well. So I decided to undertook these studies in January, and I'm absolutely loving it.
And how's your course going? So you've how far through that course at the moment?
So this is the last assignment for the certificates, but I'm doing the diploma, so I have 2 more modules, but so far it's going really, really well because I passed all the exams, so it's absolutely amazing. Not just for the course itself, but I've been meeting so many students and so many people that are absolutely fantastic. So it's not just the course itself, it's the environment in general.
And so someone starting their L&D career in 2020, what are your hopes and views on the learning and development industry?
Well, obviously the new year 2020 and then 2021, it's something that's completely changed the idea, I think, of learning and development, because so far, obviously I've seen it during the course, I've seen it while I was working in retail. There's always the idea that learning and development is mainly training, is compliance, is something that maybe it's just a tick on the box, and maybe sometimes nothing else. What I think that learning and development should focus on in 2020 is really about the realization that learning and development should be about really about the people in a way that those are the ones that need to utilize learning and development to actually progress in their careers and do the jobs better. Obviously, I think that in 2020 especially, but in the past 10 years, when the internet really came on into our lives with smartphones and computers and everything, people are actually have the opportunity to learn by themselves. So it's not just about a company that teach them and train them in doing the jobs, but they're actually the ones that can actually find the informations by themselves and actually educate themselves and decide to do courses and everything. And I think that learning and development, you need to swap on the other hand, and actually, as is being said lately, being a facilitator and not just a deliver of learning. Learning and development should canalize the interests and the motivations of the employees and the learners towards what the company is trying to achieve, and not the company trying to canalize the learning and the training into the learners. It's a bit of a weird situation at the moment. We need to facilitate this learning and try to make them really understand why they're doing the job, try to ask why they're doing the job and what they need to learn in order to get better at the jobs. So I think that the idea of learning at the moment is not just getting a seat at the table with the bigs of the companies, but actually going back to basics and just being in the field and really talk to the employees and to the learners and to the people to really understand what is needed. Because sometimes it's not just about giving them what you think they need, but actually asking them what they really need in order to perform better.
So Giulia, what do you see as the role of learning and development in an organisation?
So obviously, I think that connecting what I'm about to say about learning in the flow of work, the role of learning and development is actually being that connection between the people, the learners, the employees, and the board. So actually trying to connect these 2 points and drive the entire company towards the common goal. Having the experience in a front line actually made me understand what people really need while they're working, and not having that detachment between what they actually need while they're working and what is being taught. So it's actually, yes, having a seat at the table, but again, having a seat in the office or like in front of the computer, as we are obviously working from home now, but try to really understand having a connection with everyone. So having that role of being a bridge between everyone, obviously really understand and connect the company's objectives with the personal objectives and individual objectives of the people that work in there. Very important. So like the role of learning and development is actually trying to understand how to help them. So being servants of the people.
So learning's there to serve the people. So since being involved in learning development, you'll know there's lots of trends and fads, and people talking about learning in the flow of work, or learn people in the learning profession need to be at the top table. What are your views on all of those things that you hear?
Well, in learning in the flow of work, obviously, is a good idea in a way that obviously it's easier to make the learning transfer happen, because obviously if you learn in the flow of work, it's easier to transfer that learning into working because you're actually practicing while learning. And at the same time, obviously, having a seat at the table for learning and development, I think, yes, it should be a seat at the table. But at the same time, just to say, yes, that's what is happening in reality, what is happening every day, just to actually understand and try to, as I was saying before about law, try to understand both point of views and the different perspectives. Because obviously, the seat at the table, there's going to be certain goals and certain objectives, but at the same time, when you learn in the flow of work is when learning and development should be there and actually be a witness of what is going on, what is actually going on at work. So really understand what the people need and what the employees need to achieve what the table wants. So it's at the same time, yes, they should have, I think that learning and development should have a seat at the table, but just to make the table understand what is actually happening and how to combine the two things, and actually then to create a common goal for both of them, and try to really make understand to everyone that the goal needs to be common and not just coming from above.
So it's about creating that collective goal between the board and the frontline workers who are working with customers every day.
Yes, exactly. That's what I mean. Try to actually find a common goal and try to make everyone understand that there is a common goal.
So you're talking about almost an enabling function. So the board really understands what they need to do to empower and enable the frontline people to deliver the work that they need to deliver, and also that frontline people understand what they need to deliver for the company.
Well, that is exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that learning and development is no longer the only active part of learning, where the employees are just the passive receivers of the training. What I'm trying to say is that they need to understand, obviously, both sides and try really understand what is needed and what needs to be achieved. So they need to really, really understand what is really happening in a company. Because at the moment, well, not just lately, but it's been years now that we have obviously the opportunity to learn by ourselves. The accessibility to informations is so strong at the moment that everyone is actually able to learn by themselves. It can be an online course, it can be a book, it can be an article, it can be news from all the other side of the world. But every single person at the moment doesn't need to wait for the company to teach them something. They actually have access to information by themselves. So what I'm saying is that the role of learning and development is changing a lot. Obviously, it's changing in a way that they can't be just and only the deliverers of the training and the learning, but they actually need to facilitate and actually helping the learners and the employees pulling out the learning that they actually need when they need it.
And do you think COVID has changed anything in learning or in the way we work?
Well, obviously everything changed with COVID. But one thing that I really realized lately, and not just from my own experience, I spoke with a lot of people that found themselves working from home, and obviously being able to communicate and not being able to communicate with peers, with managers and everything, just and only digitally. And what really changed, what I really noticed, is that everything became formal. It's really weird. It's just that everything now is formal. Everything needs to go through a call. Everything needs to go through a message or an email. Everything is keeping track. There's no more that casual conversation at having a cup of coffee during a break at the office. Everything needs to go through something. And obviously what changed a lot is the feeling that people have when they need to ask questions, so they need to have a clarification. They're always afraid that maybe they're bothering the boss because maybe they're busy doing something else, and everything is making this situation formal. So obviously it's not just, it's about like the working environment as well. It's something that's really changed. Like, for instance, like as my friend's personal experience, she literally started a new job during the pandemic. So she never met a manager, she never met colleagues, she never met anyone. And obviously when you start your onboarding, you realize you really need some information, and maybe you're not sure about what needs to be done, or you feel that you need to call your manager, and then you stop yourself and you're like, yeah, maybe this is not a good question, or maybe I should know the answer to that question. So you stop, and then you stop your progression, and you actually maybe underperform. You actually were afraid just to ask a question. So that is why that's what I really noticed about COVID, that everything became formal. Very difficult even having social learning. With that, I mean that social learning obviously happens when people are talking to each other and try to learn from each other. And when you are at home and everything becomes formal, you're always afraid to ask questions, even more afraid now than ever. Everyone usually is quite afraid of admitting that they don't know something. And sometimes you don't admit that you don't know something, maybe because you're afraid of backlashes, or you're afraid of negative judgments, or maybe you're just thinking of that, yeah, I should know this. If social learning doesn't happen, there is a very big gap that is being created, because obviously everyone has knowledge and everyone has different qualities and different things that can be shared from everyone. There is something that I really care about the fact that even though it's formal, we need to make everyone understand that we are actually working all together for a common goal and not against each other. So in 2 words, collaborations and not competition is falling back again on the company's values and company's culture. Because if the culture is not created for collaboration, but is created for competition, and obviously my comment is a bit naive in this, because obviously there's always a bit of competition, but it needs to be a positive competition when everyone is trying to achieve as much as possible, but not making someone else's pay for that kind of competition.
And how do we deal with that? Because it doesn't look like COVID's going away anytime soon, and we're all going to be springing back into the office next week. So how do we break down those barriers and make that work?
There is another common word that I'm going to use here, culture. Just that what I'm trying to say is that obviously it's not something that is going to happen overnight. And I'm sure that is happening in a lot of companies, and I'm sure that there are amazing companies with amazing cultures out there. But there's most of the times it's like the mindset of the people that working that always keep being afraid of asking questions and having backlashes or having negative judgments or reaction to their questions. And I think that starting to create a community, a culture where people are actually not afraid to ask questions is a really good way to start and actually cope with COVID. Obviously, again, everything is formal, but some things can be informal as well. It depends on the way you see things. Because obviously you can create maybe an internal social network where people actually can interact with each other and trying to create this sense of community, this sense of positive work environment that could really, really help. Obviously, like having calls on Teams or Zoom or whatever that you're gonna use in your company can actually help creating this positive environment for people that work in there. And another thing, I think that another step that needs to be done and needs to be made, it needs to be made, is trying to create that psychological safety where people can they are actually allowed to make mistakes, because that is gonna help developing learning and actually having that culture of learning and actually progress and practice and make mistakes and maybe fail without being judged and without having a negative reaction to what you're doing. So actually having like this safety in making mistakes, because I think that making mistakes is very important. Most of the times you learn more from mistakes than actually from a course or something else. So yeah, I think that is one of the things that obviously can't happen overnight, but it's going to help.
So it's quite interesting because, you know, I think that culture is key. So, you know, you've got that culture of people being able to learn, to ask questions, to make mistakes. But so often companies don't have that culture, and so to flip and build that in a more remote way is going to be really interesting. Just going back to you, Giulia, have you seen that sort of culture operate anywhere, or have you been part of any such culture?
Well, actually, yes. I have been part. I'm very proud of being part of it. It happened especially during my last job, where I over on a team that it was kind of working competitively with each other. And obviously, as I said, it's something that doesn't happen overnight. It's something that you actually need to build and create and work on very, very hard, where you need to actually make the people that working together were actually working together. So working as a team, collaborating to each other when they actually want to help each other, and where they are actually utilizing the entire team to develop themselves. And it's not just about competition, but it's actually about collaboration. So creating a collaborational culture where everyone is working together to achieve, it can be a common goal or maybe a little thing. It can be implementing a practice, implementing a new structure, a new operation. It can be anything as long as everyone is working together and actually socializing and actually trying to understand who knows what and what everyone's strengths are, what everyone's weaknesses are, and not actually using these informations against each other, but actually using it together to actually create something better and something more positive.
It's really nice to hear you talking positively about learning and development and the difference it can add, particularly coming into a time, as you said, of recession with people losing jobs, people being on furlough. Why do you think it's so important that learning and development is kept by companies and doesn't just become a cost that people take off the bottom line or out of the budget?
So every single person that can be in the board, can be managers, can be line managers, can be peers, can be your colleagues, the IT department or whatever, but everyone is focusing on a certain goals. But at the end of the day, is actually trying to make that work better every single day. And learning and development is really, really important because is that department, that person, that team that is actually trying to understand how to achieve that common goal. Because, as I said before, it's not just and only about products and services. The innovations and the ideas becomes obsolete so quickly. So it's down to the people to actually trying to find new solutions and new ideas. So if you actually have a learning and development team that is actually working together, not just with the board, but with the people as well, and try to really understand how to achieve that, and having that common knowledge, common as like the community, like the actual knowledge of the entire team and the entirety of the workforce, you actually can create something. That's why, like, even having diverse mindsets at work in a company is actually really good, because everyone can see things in a different way. And that is why having a diverse mindset where you are allowing social learning into your company is actually something that could help more and more the progression and the development of that company. Obviously, that is something that needs to be supervised in a way and facilitated. And obviously, I think the learning and development is the person and is the team, is the department that actually can allow that. I know it's a bit general what I'm saying, but I really, really, really think that focusing on the knowledge of the people and try to take the best out of everyone and try to channel the knowledge of the people can be done through learning and development, and it cannot be done by anyone else.
So if I'm right in what I'm hearing you say, it's effectively the innovation that's going to help companies grow and survive is going to come from those people on the front line, being enabled and empowered to be able to understand those problems and to be involved in sharing and innovating and collaborating with others, and learning and development can be that facilitator.
Yes, as I said before, everything becomes obsolete so quickly. What I'm saying is, like, for instance, the smartphones that we have in our hands right now, maybe is the brand new one just launched today, is already obsolete. because in the company, they can be Samsung or Apple or anyone, they're already creating the new one. So it's not just about the product. That's why the investment needs to be done on the people that are actually working in a company, because it's about the knowledge, it's about the ideas, it's about the innovation. No matter what you are producing or what your service is, it's just about the people, because the end product, the one that us as customers, has people outside the company are going to enjoy, is something that is already been done and already been made, and the company is already working for something different and something more.
And so bringing your passion and your background and your experience and your knowledge, what are your hopes for your development career?
Well, I think that having different kind of experiences, having the experience like in the front line, in the fields, really made me understand how people work and what people need and what is working and what is not working in the learning and development world in a way. So I think that my hopes is actually bringing apart from my passion and enthusiasm and maybe naivety about learning and development, but especially my experience into the professional world. Because I think that we, as professional learning and development, we need to be more connected to the people that we want to help, and not just being an external partner that is just deciding from the outside. I'm really, really hoping that my future career is gonna help me and is gonna give me the opportunity to actually and physically help the people perform better and learn.
So if there was anyone out there listening to you who wanted to understand what you could bring to their team, what would that be?
Well, what I can bring into an L&D team is actually not having been inside the box for too long. I probably have the passion and enthusiasm at the moment about learning and development, and I haven't practiced professionally learning and development, and I think that I can be a good wildcard for the team. I can literally bring passion and enthusiasm for that, and obviously having my experience as a lawyer as well, I actually have very complex and different mindset on my hand. So what I'm bringing into the team is probably, as I said, passion and enthusiasm for learning and development and new ideas. I just want to go back to the basics. I want to go back to the people and not just thinking about theories and technologies and everything. Really, really understand what is needed. But obviously, as we always say in L&D, is not about the theory, is about the context. So it depends always on the industry and the context and the work environment and the people that work in there.
Well, Giulia, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been really interesting to talk to you and to hear your passion and your commitment. And just from me, I think it's really tough for not just yourself, but lots of people out in the learning industry at the moment. So lots of people have faced furlough, have faced redundancy, or like yourself have embarked on a new career trying to get into learning development unbeknown to yourself with all the changes that will come along. So I think there's a real opportunity for the industry not to lose out on some absolutely great talent out there, and we need to be helping to harness your talent and get you into a business and that you make your mark and show what that future of learning and development could be. So if anyone is motivated to pick up the phone, have a further conversation with you, get in touch, what's the best way of them making contact with you?
Well, I think that the best way is on LinkedIn. I'm always active on LinkedIn and I'm always connected. So I think that one is the best way to connect with me.
Thank you very much, Giulia, for joining us on the podcast today. Really interesting to hear your journey that you're on, and look forward to hearing about your future successes. If anyone does want to get in touch with Giulia, her LinkedIn details will be in the notes below the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.